Paul tells us in 2 Corinthians 11:26, in journeyings often, in perils of waters. If you didn't hear that one, go back to the archives and listen to it. Then he says, in perils of robbers. That's what we covered yesterday. If you didn't hear that, please go back there, take a few minutes to listen to it. And today he says, in perils by my own countrymen, in perils by the heathen. In perils by my own countrymen, in perils by the heathen. In both cases, the word perils is the Greek word kindunos, which describes something that is filled with high risk or danger. It's a risky situation. Paul says, I've encountered a lot of risk, a lot of potential danger with my own countrymen. And the word countrymen comes from the Greek word ginos, which means those of my very own same genes. He's talking about the Jews. And listen to what I write here. This word would only be used to denote someone with whom one shares a common ancestry. Paul is referring to Jewish people who constantly opposed him everywhere he went. They opposed him in Salamis. They opposed him in Antioch Pisidia. They opposed him in Iconia. They opposed him in Lystra. They opposed him in Thessalonica. They opposed him in Berea. They opposed him in Corinth, and on and on. And Paul tells us what he faced from his own natural kinsman was kindunos, extremely dangerous. You would remember that in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7, Paul talks about the thorn in the flesh. And he says, 3 times I've asked the Lord to remove it from me. And people mistakenly think that the thorn in the flesh was given to him by God, because it says there was given to me a thorn in the flesh. It doesn't say that God gave it to him. It says there was just given me. He goes on to call it the messenger of Satan. Well, it's obviously not from God. It's a messenger of Satan. Do you know what the thorn was? It was people. It was these Jews. Everywhere he went, they were the thorn in his flesh. He'd come in and preach and have a great meeting. Everything was going great with the pagans, with the Gentiles, and then the Jews show up. And the Jews show up to spoil everything. Paul got to run for his life, goes to the next city. As soon as he gets to the next city, preaching to the Gentiles, great, awesome, powerful things are happening. Then the Jews from the old city show up in the new city, and here we go again. Everywhere Paul went, they were a thorn in his flesh. And he kept saying, God, remove this thorn from me. 3 times I've said, God, remove this thorn from me. And God said, no, I'm not going to remove the thorn. But I'll give you my grace. My grace is sufficient. God couldn't answer that prayer. It would be the equivalent of saying, God, please remove all troubled people from my life. Well, the only way God can remove all troubled people from your life is to kill you, take you to heaven. In heaven, there'll be no troubled people. But as long as you're in the world, you're going to face people that are problems. So God gives us grace that is sufficient to deal with these troubled people that keep coming against us. And Paul's biggest conflict was with people of his own ancestry, his own countrymen. But he says, in addition to that, how about perils from the heathens? High risk danger from the heathens. Heathens is the Greek word ethnos. It describes anyone non-Jewish, and in this particular case, pagan idol worshipers. Just read in the book of Acts, chapter 19. Where you read about the great riot that took place in the city of Ephesus because Paul was preaching the gospel, and all the pagans joined together in the great theater of Ephesus, about 20,000 of them, and began to raise their voice and made such a ruckus that the whole city came together, and Paul's very life was endangered by the pagans that were upset about his preaching of the gospel. You know, sometimes you just feel like you just cannot please anybody. Here he was, upsetting his own Jewish countrymen. Couldn't make them happy. Couldn't make the pagans happy. Half the time, people in the church were upset with him. And that's why you have to know what you're called to do. You have to know. Because if the approval of people is what you're after, you're going to be in heaps of trouble. Because one day they'll like you, the next day they'll want to stone you. You've got to know what God has called you to do. That's number one. Get people in agreement with you whom you trust. And you need to forge ahead to do what God has called you to do, regardless of the response of others. The approval that you're after is the approval of Christ. Nobody else. Nobody else. And if you'll do what He tells you to do, you'll have His approval. I hope this has encouraged you today. Stay on track. Stay on track regardless of any opposition that you feel pulling you from side to side. If Paul can do it, you can do it too.